Hey Grace Kids, it is great to be with you again today, and we're going to be talking about a new lesson concerning Joseph and his family and how that correlates with Christ. But I am super stoked about getting you this information. Now, we're going to be going over our verse that we've been going through in the last couple of lessons in Hosea chapter 13 and verse 4. It says, "Yet I am the Lord thy God from the land of Egypt, and thou shalt know no God but me, for there is no Savior beside me." And that is something that we have to understand as human beings, that there is no one who saves aside from our God. God is the one who saves, and He sent His Son to die for us, to save us, and we need to acknowledge that and have faith in God for that salvation. Now, we're going to be talking about how God gave Joseph power to understand dreams when Joseph explains these dreams to a cupbearer, to a baker, to the Pharaoh himself. And remember, dreams are part of Joseph's life in the sense of, you go back to what he did with his brothers. He actually, and his parents, he explained two different dreams to them, and they got pretty upset with him. But yet God is actually going to be making those dreams come true in the sense of Joseph reigning over them, having the authority over them. So it's very pertinent for you to understand what happened before and what is going to happen here soon. So is there anything that God cannot do? Is there anything that God cannot do? The answer to that is God can do all things according to His character. So can God sin? No, because that goes directly against His character. Okay? And so, yes, God can do all things according to His character. I hope you remember that. So this is going to be the background of the stories in Genesis chapter 39 and verse 40, Genesis chapter 39 through chapter 41. So if you'd like to check that out, have your parents read that with you. If you can read it on your own, that'd be great. It'd be a good thing for you to be able to get into. So as we get into this, we find out, Joseph went from being the favorite to being sold into slavery. And when he gets to Egypt, they actually sell him to one of Pharaoh's officers, Potiphar. Now, Joseph doesn't just sit there and pout. He actually does the best that he can with what he has. He doesn't let this get to him. Yes, I imagine he struggled through it. Okay, but he doesn't let it get to him. He didn't sit there and say, life's not fair. No, he got up and he did his work. And guess what? Potiphar ends up making Joseph second in command, his own personal assistant, to where he didn't really know what was going on. Joseph knew everything that was going on. Okay? And so Joseph rises up. He's successful. He's in charge. But guess what? Potiphar's wife kind of likes Joseph. And she tries to get him in trouble, but he runs away from this temptation. He says, I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to sin against God. I'm not going to sin against my master Potiphar. And she doesn't like it. She wanted him to do something wrong with her. And so she ends up falsely accusing Joseph. Now, how do you feel when you get falsely accused? Nobody likes that. Nobody likes that. And so he struggles through that, but yet when she goes and tells her husband gets mad and throws him into jail. Wait, that's not fair. That can't be fair. And yet, what does Joseph do? Well, he can't do anything except for go to jail, but yet he does his best, and God blesses him even in the midst of the jail, and he's made in charge of all the prisoners. Wow, do you see the correlation of what's going on here? In each situation that Joseph gets into, he ends up doing his best, and God blesses him. Now, there was two different prisoners that had a couple of dreams. Now, one was a cupbearer, and he had this dream, and he was just troubled by it. He didn't understand it. It didn't seem to make total sense to him. So Joseph says, hey, tell me what it is, and I'll try to explain it to you. Okay? God gives the explanation. God helps him explain these dreams. And so the cupbearer says, well, there was this vine with 3 branches, and grapes grew on them. Well, then all of a sudden, I squeezed these grapes into the cup for Pharaoh. And he says, oh, okay, all right. So God gives him the answer to this dream. And Joseph says, well, in 3 days, you'll be set free, and you'll be back serving Pharaoh where you were before. Oh, well, that's nice news, isn't it? Well, then there's another one. There's a baker, and he says, listen, I have 3 baskets of bread, and I have them on my head. Now, I don't know if you can balance those baskets on your head. Don't try it, because you're going to get me in trouble, because you're going to dump all the bread, and bread is precious right now. People are freaking out about their bread. And so he packs them up on top of his head, and he's carrying them along. Well, all of a sudden, birds start eating this bread out of the baskets. And it never gets to Pharaoh. It never gets to Pharaoh. And so what's going on here? And Joseph says, well, here's what your dream is. In 3 days, you'll be put to death. Whoa, not the kind of news I'd like to hear. And yet, guess what happened? In 3 days, the cupbearer goes back to his position, serving Pharaoh, and the baker dies. Now, something that Joseph said before the cupbearer goes back to Pharaoh, he says, remember me. I'm not in here because of anything that I did. I was falsely accused. And the cupbearer said, oh, yeah, I'll remember you. Guess what? The cupbearer didn't remember him until 2 years later. 2 years later. That's a long time, isn't it? Okay? But 2 years later, he finally remembers him when Pharaoh has 2 dreams. And nobody can tell Pharaoh what these dreams are all about. And so the cupbearer says, hey, I know somebody. And it's Joseph. He was in the prison with me. And he explained my dream. And it came true. It came true exactly how he stated it. And so Pharaoh says, hey, get this guy out here. So Pharaoh has this dream. And one of the dreams is that there were 7 fat cows that were eaten by 7 skinny cows. What? That is the weirdest thing I have ever heard, isn't it? And then you get to the second dream, and it's 7 fat bundles of grain or heads of grain that eat 7 skinny heads of grain. What in the world? Well, grain being something that a farmer grows, and it's used for food, okay? And you say, well, what is all that about? Well, Joseph says something that I think is very interesting. And he says it in Genesis chapter 41 and verse 16. It says, and Joseph answered Pharaoh, saying, it is not in me. God shall give Pharaoh an answer of peace. And so it's actually God who's going to give this answer. And Joseph says, listen, God is helping me explain this dream. And both of these dreams are the same thing, basically. You will have 7 years where all of your crops will be good, will be doing great, you'll have plenty of food, but guess what? 7 years right after that will be total famine. We'll get nothing. And so guess what? You need to set up somebody who can kind of manage the crops and make sure that we save enough up from the first 7 years for the next 7 years where we're not going to have anything. And so, you know what? Pharaoh realized that God was with Joseph. So guess what he does? He makes Joseph second in command, to where Joseph is actually the one that is managing all the crops. And so Joseph gets up and he actually sets it up to where they have so much that everybody from every other country around is coming over to get food from Egypt. Guess what? Egypt is racking up the money. Man, they're getting rich. They're becoming powerful. And it's all because God blessed Joseph. And through him, he ends up saving Joseph's family. But you know what? In Joseph's adversity or trials or bad circumstances, God actually elevates him in each circumstance to be used in a huge way according to his plan. Because God has a plan and he's faithful to make that all happen. Now, this is a very, very cool story, but how does Christ correlate with all of this? Well, Christ, in the same way that Joseph goes through trials and tough situations, but yet he was exalted later and he was used in God's plan for what he wanted, same way with Christ. Christ went through tough trials. He died on the cross. There was people that spit on him and hit him, and he was put on that cross. He was beaten. He went through all of these things for what? So that others could have salvation, so that others could be saved through the way that God uses Jesus Christ. So there's a picture there that you see in the same way that Joseph was used, Christ was used in a similar fashion. Now how are you going to remember this? Well, I've got a few questions for you. Hopefully you're listening. One of those is, why did Joseph go to prison? Oh, it's because Potiphar's wife falsely accused him of doing something wrong. Okay? Whose dreams did Joseph explain in prison? Well, it was the cupbearer and the baker. Okay? That's who he explained. When did the cupbearer remember Joseph? 2 years later. 2 years. Crazy. How old will you be in 2 years? I will be 32. Oh, crazy, crazy. All right, how did Joseph know how to explain the dreams? Well, remember what I said? God helped him know. And then, how does God reveal things to us today? Is it through dreams still? Or is it through His Word? Got it. God's Word. God gives us His Word so that we know what to do, when to do it. Okay? And we need to pay attention to that in order to know how to live our lives. So how do you think Joseph felt in the midst of all this, being sold into slavery, being all alone, going through such rough trials? Rough trials. Did he cry out and say, "This isn't fair"? Well, I imagine he felt it sometimes. But you know what? He did what he could to be the best he could be where he was at. He found himself content, even though it wasn't fair. All right, lots of things for you today, and I hope you enjoyed that lesson. But then a way that you can remember all of this, again, is try a memory game. Some of you have memory games at home where you try to match different cards. You know, they're turned over, and you pick one up, and then you try to find a match, and it's hidden, and then you put them back if you didn't get the right match, and the next person goes, and you pick one up, and then you try to find the match, and if you get it, then you get to keep those cards. Try one of those games here today, and if you don't have those cards, make some up on a piece of paper. You've got time to do it. All right, hope you enjoyed that today. We will see you soon, Lord willing. Talk to you later, Grace Kids.